the Rams at the Saints. I find this game quite a bit easier to cap than the Chiefs-Patriots. I like the Saints here. I also like the under. The opening lines that I will be given are from BetOnline. BetOnline is also sponsoring our BetCast, but I use BetOnline opening lines anyways because they have the balls to be first to the market, and I respect that very, very much. Open Saints -3, juiced heavy at -125. Now the -3s are juiced between -110 and -120. You can get 3.5s, but you have to pay for it. Total open at 57. Now there's a mix of 56.5s and 57s. As you guys know, the Saints won their regular season matchup 45-35 in Week 9 in New Orleans. In that game, the Saints built up a big 35-14 lead. Rams came back, tied it up in the fourth, and then the Saints took care of business late. Rams ranked 6th in defensive efficiency on the road. Saints ranked 2nd in offensive efficiency at home. Breeze led the league at an 89.7 total QBR in home games this season. Now, back in Week 9, Sean Payton said he liked the Thomas-Peters matchup for his side. Thomas caught 12 passes for 211 yards, including a 72-yard touchdown over Peters. Now we have Aqib Talib back. He's healthy. So the Rams are going to play more man-to-man coverage so they can get Talib on Thomas at times in this game. Rams haven't been an underdog all season. And I don't think the stat is that important, but Jared Goff has struggled in this spot during his 2 seasons. 2-8 against the spread and 10 career starts as an underdog. As for the total, it's gone over. It is 4-0, the over, in 4 postseason games with an over-under of at least 57 in the past 30 seasons. Also, a chance for a low penalty game are good. Bill Vinovich, his regular season crew, throws the fewest flags per game this season. He called 11 in the Colts-Texans wildcard game. That will help the unders, probably. Both the Saints and the Rams are among the least penalized teams. And an interesting stat, the Rams are 0-8 in games that Vinovich has handled since the start of 2012. I don't think that's too big of a deal. So the Rams have a clean bill of health. The Saints will be without defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins. I think that's a pretty big blow. The loss earlier still lingers for these Rams. The Rams now feature a 1-2 punch with Todd Gurley and C.J. Anderson. C.J. Anderson has fresh legs. He's looking very good. The two combined for 238 yards in the divisional round win. Ndamukong Suh also is playing better. Talib is back. I just don't think that Goff is good enough to win a game this big yet. That's what I think. I think it comes down to me thinking Goff is just not good enough to win this kind of game at the Superdome. Donnie Rightside, conference finals. Let's start with you. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, early thoughts in this one. It's going to be a really good football game, but I think, the tale of the two teams as the season has gone on has changed some opinions here. If you watched our shows, obviously on the Audible, like during midseason, like New Orleans was really playing, chess out here when everybody else was playing checkers, running up high numbers, high explosivity on offense, 45, 50 points. I mean, I'm obviously watching my Philadelphia Eagles get shattered 48-7 in one of those football games. But now you're seeing down the stretch a little bit tighter to the best Saints team. Not to say the Saints aren't a good football team, because they really are. And they were still my pick, early on midseason to go to the Super Bowl, still looking in a very good shot to actually do that. But styles really do make fights in this one. And it's one where you're saying, that early matchup, we had 35-35, and they pulled away in the final couple minutes there to make it 45-35 in that football game early in the season. But both of these teams are different. You bring up a really good point there, Jimmy. I mean, Aqib Talib being out of that game, and what Aqib Talib, I've seen even the SBR Twitter accounts tweeted out, the difference with Talib just being in the football game for when he's out. Did you watch last week against the Cowboys? Aqib Talib might have missed, 2 or 3 possessions there heading back into the locker room for concussion protocol. And all of a sudden, the Rams were playing 10 to 12 yards off. And this was the Dallas Cowboy receivers with Dak Prescott. When he's back into the football game, it's completely different. So I'm going to look at that. But, before we get totally immersed in this game, which is great because we have an hour to talk about both of them, the over-under seems a little bit high to me in this game based on the way I think both of these teams will play this, more of a ground game and using the play-action pass to open it up. Early on, I'm leaning it toward the under in this one. I think you're getting a pretty good price, and we're not talking about 42, 43, 44. You're talking about 57 points here in order to cash that.
I agree. I find the under probably the most appealing spot in either of these two games to me. Flipper13 says the Saints win. Barry Miller says, I like the first half under. Tom Marino says, I think the best value in Saints-Rams is the under. Neither team is throwing down the field. Saints' offensive line is beat up. Dom Ricci, I'm on the Rams. I think their running game will get them to the bowl. Eddie Euler, leaning Rams plus 3.5 and Saints money line, hoping to win both. Nick O, take the Saints. Breeze versus Goff. Come on. Whale Capper, what are you thinking here?
Well, it wouldn't be fun if we all agreed. And I'm opposite you guys on the total. I think the over is the look in this one. And I think there's a number of ways this game plays out that all lend themselves to over 60 points. I don't respect the Rams defense particularly. I don't think Aqib Talib carrying all of these injuries is a difference maker, differentiating factor. I don't think, we saw 45 points from the Saints in the first meetup. Granted, they are a little bit different team in terms of how they're approaching this game. But if the Saints go out and score another 45 points here, I'm not even going to be remotely surprised. And I do think the Saints are the right side. But for me, the over is probably my preferred look on this game. I'll make the case now. Jared Goff, and actually from a side standpoint, you nailed it, Jimmy. This handicap breaks down very simply. Is Jared Goff good enough to get it done when the pressure is the highest and you are down on the road in the fourth quarter in the NFC Championship game? And to me, the answer is no. I do not think the Rams can construct a game plan where they go out, get a lead, and play keep away like they did against the Cowboys. That's not happening against the Saints. And a lot of that is because the Saints are at home. A lot of that is because Drew Brees and Sean Payton have shown an ability to really craft a game-specific game plan on offense that attacks the weaknesses of the opposing team's defense. And the Rams have those weaknesses. They are clear as day. You get Alvin Kamara out in space along the perimeter against this very slow and not impressive linebacking and safety crew. He is going to have many, many, many yards in front of him. And so Kamara in for a big day. Thomas, brilliant matchup. The Rams don't necessarily like to alternate which side. They don't like to stick a guy on a hat on a hat so much. And anytime Thomas is matched up against one of the secondary corners, either Peters or the nickel dime guys, if they can get some trips on certain sides, the 15-yard, 20-yard gains are going to be there for the taking. The Saints in this, most likely outcome in this game is that the Saints score early and often, put pressure on the Rams, not unlike we saw in their first matchup. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Saints have a pretty comfortable lead going into halftime. We've seen the Rams' ability to come back and answer in games with their backs against the wall. They have the offensive skill players to do it. The Saints aren't necessarily going to be able to get after them and consistently rush the passer and put lots of pressure on Goff to force them into force him into making mistakes and force them into punts in the second half when they're trying to come back in this game. All that leads me to the over. I think the Rams get over 20 points in this game just out of desperation. And I think if the Saints punt in this game more than, 3 times, I will be floored. I really don't see what's stopping them in the Dome at home. This is a beautiful spot for this team. And I think the final total we see here is something like 38-21-ish, 38-20. So, I'm looking for, I'm calling out scores that are pretty close to the total, I know. But I feel like there's a pretty long tail of, potential opportunities here for the Saints to get into the 40s and the Rams to get into the 20s, taking the total over 60. So give me a position on the Saints here at minus 3, minus 3.5. I'll buy out to I sell out to -4 without really blinking an eye on this one, and give me over the current total because I think this one sails over 60.
Very interesting breakdown that only makes me like the Saints more, but does have me questioning the total. My man Dexter Rojas out of Hawaii, he's laughing. He says, this is what we all said about the Eagles, though, and we really didn't. Both Whale Capper and I were leaning towards the under. I wanted to bet the under, but after an 0-3 start to the weekend last week, I did not. It was one of the plays that I cut. I feel like the rust is sort of that they were rusty in that game last week, the Saints, and that they should be able to roll right here. Fred Giali says revenge factor for Rams, leaning Rams plus 3.5 and the over. He also said earlier that he likes the first half under and the full game over. Sean Mick says, so Whale Capper, it sounds like Saints -3 looks good. I agree with that. Don Ricci says, if Rams go up 14 like the Eagles, they won't lose. I would be very surprised to not see the Saints get off to a good start here. Triple Beam says Goff hates pressure, needs structure, and improvise and go off script. And in that building, the Superdome, you better be ready to go off script. I think that's a great, great comment, Triple Beams. Shout out to my man, Rock Nation. Thanks, smash that like button. We want the Audible show to stay lit. Love you, Rock Nation. Anil Frank says Goff, 6 TDs, 2 picks for 609 yards in his 2 games inside the Superdome. He made his NFL debut there with a 109 passer rating. Yes, sure. But the winner of this game goes to the Super Bowl. And, it makes the hair on my arms straighten up. That's some exciting shit. This is a big boy game. Is Goff ready to win a game like this? I don't think he is. Donnie Rightside, after hearing Whale Capper, hearing myself, and breaking it down the first time, what are your final thoughts on this game, and what angles do you think you'll be rolling with come Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely against the grain on both, which is great. This is why we have the show. I mean, if you can't just take, one game looks at it. But the Philadelphia Eagles are absolute smoke and mirrors coming down the stretch. I mean, Nick Foles didn't do anything against the Washington Redskins. Nick Foles did nothing against the Chicago Bears. And Nick Foles didn't do anything against the New Orleans Saints for 3.5 quarters. When you look at the Rams offense of what they can do versus what the Eagles can do, it's night and day. If you could have just put one football player on the Philadelphia Eagles for last Sunday, just one, and we won't even need to give him Todd Gurley. Give him C.J. Anderson. They obliterate the New Orleans Saints last week, and I mean obliterate them. The Eagles, every time they hand it off, was like a negative play because you have bums in the backfield. That was the only thing missing last week was an average running back. Now you're going to get 2 of them. Dallas is a very good defense. And they went up and down the field, the Los Angeles Rams, and annihilated that Dallas defense, pushed them all over the field, did whatever they wanted, punted one time, and didn't get 3 and out at once. And that Dallas defense is light years above what I think the New Orleans Saints defense can be. Now, when you're taking a look at styles make fights in this game, you're looking at Sheldon Rankins going down this week. That's Fletcher Cox. That's their Aaron Donald. That's when I can push the pocket up the middle, and if you're not a mobile quarterback, I'm going to put your center into your lap. That's all of a sudden gone. And they have 2 outstanding tackles, left tackle and right tackle, for the Los Angeles Rams. I honestly believe Goff is going to have all the time in the world to throw the football on Sunday, and his play action is going to be devastating because now instead of the Eagles running RPO play action where everybody in the stands and at home, including my living room, was laughing every time we faked like we were going to run the football, now all those linebackers are coming up because if you don't, that's a 5, 6, 7, 8-yard gain with ease from Todd Gurley and C.J. Anderson. Now, when you're looking from a Saints perspective in this game, they're great. It's hard to win in the Dome. We understand that there. And sometimes you might need to get a good number, 3.5, as opposed to 3 in this game to see if it sticks up. But as the Saints have progressed throughout the season, what has really been impressive where you think the Saints can run away from a team? Because they haven't ran away from anybody. I mean, even if you start with that Dallas game, they took a loss 13-10. They went on the road the following week to Tampa Bay. And let's not forget, Tampa Bay was up 14-3 in the second half versus that New Orleans Saints team. Then you look at the Carolina Panthers. Cam Newton with one arm tied behind his back. They should have routed New Orleans in that football game, but they had no vertical passing game. Then you fast forward to the Pittsburgh Steelers game. Mike Tomlin doesn't go for a 4th down punt return up the middle. They lose that football game as well. Take the week off to Carolina, which they got their backups got shellacked. And then you opened up against the Eagles, who barely have an offense back here, and they're down 14-0. The Rams aren't going to play this game on Sunday. If the Rams don't turn the football game over, I see the Rams steadying the pace of the game, forcing Drew Brees to dink and dunk down the field. And I know, look, the front line for the New Orleans Saints is very good, but just about every single one of them is one play away from getting knocked out of the football game, whether it be torn pectoral muscles, whether it be broken hands. How would you like to be a guard and have a broken hand and try to deal with Aaron Donald this weekend in this football game? You saw what the Eagles' front 4 was able to do last week with absolutely 0 in their secondary. The Eagles' secondary is embarrassing and held Drew Brees down. This Rams defense is way better than the Philadelphia Eagles. I got the Rams winning outright in this one.
Wow. Anil Frank says Saints were not impressive, rusty or not. No excuses in the playoffs. You don't feel like the Saints needed that game last week, Donnie?
No, and look, the Saints are really good. They have a great head coach, one of the best quarterbacks out there. But I just think with this matchup here, and I think the Rams do win it outright. But again, I keep on saying, numbers do matter in these football games. because I don't see a run away from the Saints. I just don't think the Saints offense can run away anymore from anybody, especially if you just slow down Michael Thomas. And what I mean by slow down is 7 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown. Where else is the offense coming from? Because they're dormant at every other wide receiver and tight end spot outside of their running game. So I just think it's going to be an interesting, dichotomy. Who's going to be able to jump out? Do I think anybody's running away? No. But that New Orleans Saints, if I could go back in a time machine and pull out that Saints team from October, November, they would run circles around the Rams again on on offense. I just don't think it's the same team right now.
Very, very interesting. When Whale Capper was breaking down that game, I added first half to my full game with the Saints. If I had have made that bet there, I might be betting the opposite side after what Donnie just had to say. Now, I still like the Saints, but I would sure like Whale Capper to whisper sweet nothings in my ear and tell me everything's going to be okay.
Everything's going to be okay, Jimmy. Everything's going to be okay. Those points were all well taken. My initial rebuttal as far as why the Saints are still the right side in this really I can kind of construct for you, what is different about this Saints team than the Saints team we saw in the middle of the season? They lost a key player. Have they, key injury on the offensive line? Drew Brees' arm's just tired now. He's not throwing it downfield as much. My expectation really about what we see out of the Saints is a lot more like what we saw in October and November. They clearly put their foot on the gas through the middle of the season because they knew how important it was to have home field advantage in the playoffs because of how big the home field advantage is in the Superdome. They have been singularly focused on making the Super Bowl for going on 15 weeks. And I would say, without a doubt, there are plays in their playbook we haven't seen from them in a while that we are going to see on Sunday. There are looks in the passing game that Drew Brees is capable of bringing to the table that we haven't seen from him in, a month plus. I feel like clearly the 14-0 hole that they dug for themselves against the Eagles was a huge wake-up call. The Saints team clearly they were rusty as can be. They put up a stinker in Week 17 when they took their foot off the gas playing against the Panthers. And without a doubt, the lingering effects of kind of not really having rhythm on offense, which is important for Drew Brees. Like, he absolutely needs to know where his receivers are going to be because he is a get the ball out of his hand fast type of quarterback. And if he's experiencing a little bit of, missed timing there, a little bit of, I'm not 100% sure who the look is going to be relative to this defense, all of that was clearly apparent, and that's because they had 2 weeks off. I would expect a lot of that rust was shaken by the comeback win against the Eagles. And I would even go so far as to say there's probably going to be a little bit of a motivational bump from the fact that they faced Nick Foles with the ball in his hands at the 2-minute warning with a chance to win the game. And they came away it was a close call. They came close to, giving that thing away and ruining their season, but they get a lucky pick with the Alshon Jeffrey drop, and the game swings back in their direction. I think you see a more confident, a more fresh, a more dangerous team out of the Saints than we saw against the Eagles. And I'm willing to completely write off a lot of the performances we saw from them down the stretch. People keep bringing up, they didn't look great against the Cowboys. They didn't look great against the Panthers. They were on a hellacious stretch when they played that Panthers team on Monday Night Football, third road game in a row. They were on a hellacious stretch against the Cowboys. The Cowboys, that was their third week at home after some confidence-building wins over Thanksgiving. They have not been in a particularly good situation until really this point. You can point to last week and say, hey, the Eagles ran out of gas because that was their third week on the road. And that, I think, played a lot into, the fact that the Saints were able to come back and put that game away. But this is a good spot for the Saints. They've been home going on like 40 days or something. Like, they've been home. They've been practicing in their facility. They're comfortable. Meanwhile, the Rams got to get on a flight early. They got to fly out to New Orleans. They're playing relatively early for a West Coast team. I know the kickoff is at noon. It's not like, they're playing at 10 in the morning, but it's relatively early. Like, I'm expecting that we're going to see the Saints look look dangerous as hell from the first whistle, put immediate pressure on this Rams team. And then the question really comes down to, can the Rams make a comeback? So that's kind of my overall kind of the way that I see the game and the DNA of these teams at this point. Circling back to the line itself and how you want to approach betting this game. If you think the Rams are alive and you want to, you're interested in betting the Rams this weekend, that's fine. Like, you shouldn't necessarily kind of be watching this show and like making decisions based on what we're saying. You should go through your process. Use these information like Jimmy does and kind of evaluate, okay, should I add something? Does this reinforce something that I've already come up with? Make this part of your process. Don't just listen to us and tail and whatever. And I would say if you are looking at Rams +3, think very carefully about not buying 3.5. And I say this is like a personal kind of rule that I have, at least for betting the NFL. If you don't think you have an edge at +3, and then almost certainly you do not at +3.5 at the price that they're going to offer you. And so just be conscientious of that and think hard of, okay, well, how does this game end? Where the Rams, +3 is a push and 3.5 is a winner. Like, it's such a narrow set of circumstances that outcome comes into play on Sunday, in my opinion, that the value that you would, that you're expecting in terms of the price you're paying at this point is not in line. Think much more, carefully about betting the Rams on the money line than buying a hook on 3.5. That's just kind of my personal feeling about betting the NFL. I know not everybody feels that way. And the math, it supports it in some situations and not others. I am expecting this to be an especially high scoring game. I'm expecting there to be quite a few touchdowns in this game. All of that means the likelihood that you have a surprise. Oh, Rams went for 2. Oh, Saints missed an extra point. Like, the likelihood that you have a really bizarre final score here, as opposed to they answer each other touchdown for touchdown for touchdown, and it's a tie game with a minute left, and the Saints go down the field and kick the game-winning field goal. Like, that's a real, it sounds reasonable when you lay it out that way, but it's not a very likely outcome, in my opinion, and almost certainly not given the way that they're pricing this market right now. So just kind of keep that in mind as you make a decision in terms of, what side you want in your pocket as you head into Sunday.
In very, very interesting breakdowns. Great job, you guys. Donnie, I have one question, and maybe I'll throw it at both you guys here. I'm not a fan of Dak Prescott, and I love Marinelli. Wasn't very high on the Cowboys this year. Didn't expect them at the beginning of the year to win the division. Late in the season, I started getting very high on Nick Foles, really liking what the Eagles were doing. I did not take Eagles on the money line after all of our breakdowns and after having the bad start to the weekend last week. Just had them +8.5. But in my estimation, I think that the Saints at home against the Eagles was a much tougher, was a tougher test than the Cowboys on the road playing the Rams. And on a neutral site, if the Cowboys were playing the Eagles last week, I would have taken the Eagles. Donnie, who do you think was a better team or a tougher spot? Do you think that the Rams were in a better spot than the Saints last week? Because do you agree with my estimation, and you know this Eagles team well, and you weren't very high on them late. Do you think that it was a tougher spot against the Eagles than it was against the Cowboys?
Yeah, because, last week when we were talking about the 4 games, I said that what would surprise me the most out of all 4 games is if the Dallas Cowboys would have beaten the Los Angeles Rams. Would have surprised me, because you were going in there saying, what? Zeke, get the ball 40 times and rush for 250, and we might have a chance, which you knew that wasn't going to work out, and they got blown out in that football game. Forget about the 8-point, final spread. The Rams did whatever they wanted in that game. The Eagles heading down to the Dome, I actually didn't think it was a very good matchup for the Eagles, and they really played well in the secondary, which was surprising, because everything you would think of, Sean Payton's going to dial it up, they're going to take shots, and if you saw, the game probably changed. It's kind of funny, on one single play, where they said, you know what? Watch us run Ted Ginn deep against this team that can't defend anybody. And Crevon LeBlanc came up with an interception on the first play. Let's just say if Drew Brees doesn't underthrow that ball and it's a 10 Ginn touchdown, we might be looking at a completely different game. But overall, I was more surprised with the I wasn't, or I should have said I wasn't surprised with the Cowboys taking the loss last week.
And if last week they were playing the Eagles against the Cowboys on a neutral field, who would you have taken?
Eagles would beat the Cowboys, yeah.
And what do you think about that, Will Kepper?
I agree that the Eagles were the more dangerous team last week. I think that the Saints' comeback win was more impressive than the Rams' win. I think the Rams got lucky. I think that the Cowboys' game plan really played into the Rams' hands. They didn't, when it was pretty apparent at halftime that the Rams were doing a very good job of ball control and keeping it away from your offense. Your defense was doing nothing to stop their running attack, and yet you did not adjust your approach in the second half to attack the Rams downfield where they're vulnerable. And maybe you didn't have confidence in your quarterback to make the throws. That's fine. But the offensive approach by the Cowboys in the full game and the adjustments that they made coming out of the second half did not impress me at all. On the flip side, the Eagles were playing with exceptionally high confidence. Those, the secondary is not, they were not talented players, but my goodness, were they playing out of their shoes. Like they left their hearts on the field for every one of those games down the stretch, including that Saints game. And I give a huge credit to the coaching staff for getting those guys coached up. I would say that the Saints, by and large, were impacted by rust, by not really knowing, how the Eagles had kind of changed their DNA from the first time they faced them. It looked kind of like the Saints expected that they were going to go out and just run over them again. And when they're down 14-0, you kind of had a little bit of deer in the headlights look on a lot of guys. And so, the fact that they came back in that game, the fact that they made a key stop when they needed it, all of that stuff kind of, I feel like lends itself to the Saints being, having a little bit higher momentum right now, a little bit more, they're a hotter team, I guess, than I feel like the Rams are. The Rams, I feel like, got lucky, even though you could argue that it should have been a 15-point win with the way that the penalties went down late with the Cowboys. I would argue the Saints probably should have covered that game because it did not feel like it was fairly officiated. When the Saints needed points, and they were on that freaking massive drive, they got touchdown called back, the 40-yard touchdown to Kamara called back. They got, 1st and 20 like 4 times, and they overcame it. Like, it was a very, very impressive moment for the Saints on that drive, and I feel like that really crystallized their run that's going to take them all the way to a Lombardi Trophy.
Donnie also talked about that Buccaneers game, and when I was watching that Buccaneers game, I wasn't sitting there thinking, wow, they're having so much trouble against this bad Bucs team. I thought it was a bad travel spot, and when they came back and outscored them something like 25-0 in the second half, I was like, oh, this team's going to go to the Super Bowl. I thought it showed quite a bit. Very, very interesting breakdown. Well, Kepper, I know you like the over a lot. I don't think, would you say, to me it looks, if I like the under. I'm more concerned about the second half than the first half. I think both offenses are going to try to, stretch out long drives to keep the other offense off the field. Do you feel that the first half under, even though I know that you're on the other side, would be more appealing than the full game under?
I like both overs. I like first half over. I like full game over. And granted, the first half over would be predicated on the Saints, again, looking competent offensively. I don't know what would challenge that necessarily. I'm expecting the atmosphere to help them, and I'm expecting them to score touchdowns, not field goals. These are two very, very capable and accomplished passing attacks against two secondaries that have places to be attacked. And I would think that if the Saints can, I'm expecting the Saints to, score with relative ease in the first half of this game. If Goff has any sign of, happy feet in the pocket like he had in the first half against the Cowboys, the Saints could come away with a pretty advantageous turnover, short fields. We saw that in the first matchup. Wouldn't surprise me at all if we have another one of these. And then the question then is, for the full game over, do the Rams continue their trend of making solid second half adjustments, come back out, hit some of the hit the Saints where they are a little bit lacking depth in the secondary because they can't. Like the Rams have weapons. Guys like Reynolds and Woods, matched up against defensive backs not named Lattimore should have nice days for the Rams. And I could see that, if this is a little bit lopsided scoreboard wise at halftime, the Rams are going to be a pretty nice play in the second half here for me. But overall, I think the likelihood of a first half under kind of hinges on continued rust for the Saints, which I feel like has been shattered to a degree by the way they performed in the second half against the Eagles.
Very, very interesting breakdown from both you guys. Very, very interesting. I'm still leaning under and going to bet the Saints. I can understand why a lot of people in the chat are on the Rams. There are some injury issues with the Saints where the Rams are a healthy group, but I just feel like in the Superdome, Goff's going to have trouble, even though he didn't have trouble last time. This is just a different animal when all you need to do is win to get to the Super Bowl.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.